My name is Robert Acensio. I'm here for a new show called Police Stories on Miami's community newspapers. Directly to my left is the great Mr. Michael Miller.
Thank you for inviting me, Robert.
You're welcome. Thank you. Thank you for coming to my house.
Yes.
And then directly to my right is a guy I've known for a long time, a couple decades. I call him a legend. But in police work, he's now gone on to other jobs, and he's now the deputy chief of South Miami, and it's Charles Nanney. Charles, why don't you introduce yourself?
Charles Nanney, assistant chief at South Miami Police Department. I've been here since right before the pandemic, and I did 31 years in Miami-Dade Police. I retired as a chief from there.
Nothing major, right?
No, it's just it's just Dade County.
Yeah. So look, everybody hears about police work. We've heard about negative stories, but let's concentrate on the positive stuff, right? There's a lot of positive stuff. There's roughly 34 municipalities in Dade County.
Yep. There's approximately 35 or 37 different police departments.
And we have a whole bunch of officers on the road, people who serve you on a day-to-day basis. They keep us safe. They go above and beyond. And this man to my right, I got to tell you, I'm getting goosebumps just thinking about it. Man, I remember sometimes being in Liberty City when I worked in Liberty City for the school board and going responding to silent alarms and all of a sudden being shot at. The most terrifying feeling you could ever have, right? Michael, you ever been shot at?
No, just by a hand. All right.
Well, this was hand and gun.
Yes.
And then calling for backup, right? And then all of a sudden seeing these officers come to your help. Brother, thank you for all those times. I never said thank you.
You guys were our best. And it was a partnership back then, the school board and Miami-Dade Police, especially. It was called Central District back then, which is now Northside Station.
There's a lot of stuff that
Robert,
happened.
how long were you with the school board police department?
26 years.
Wow.
A lifetime.
So what is that like when you know somebody is trying to minimum hurt you, all right, and or kill you? What's that like when you hear that gunshot to both of you? What is that like emotionally?
What do you think, Nanney?
This is going to sound weird to the average citizen, but that's kind of what most cops, that doesn't bother them. To me, I got shot at a bunch of times, had shootouts. To me, it was fun because they make up to somebody drawn to police work. You want to serve and protect and go catch the bad guys. But it does, get your attention, and then your training does automatically kick in. That's the why training is so important. Like South Miami, Dade County as a whole, I could tell you the crime numbers, both from, being in law enforcement so long, as well as being a professor at FIU, where I studied all the numbers simultaneously while affecting the numbers. But crime is low, but one crime is one too many. So in South Miami, it's very low crime. However, we have to train our people to be ready for shootouts and how they're going to react. And also simultaneously, just say, God forbid, we're at somewhere like Sunset Place, and there's a shootout. Everybody thinks, well, you just shoot back. Well, no, there may be kids behind the perpetrator. There may be, we had a fake active shooter call there. And, I don't know if you guys recall the response.
Mm-hmm.
And that response was necessary because we want to close down, contain, but we have to do everything safely. So we can't just, we're going to return fire, but you got to still factor in that split second decision that, there's the bad guy shooting at you. You're here, but you're in a crowded mall. There's kids, there's workers, there's people there. You have to factor out in. So that's why training is so important.
You bring up something that's really important for us lay people to try to wrap our hands around. When you're drawn to police work, that's what's going to happen. All right, it is going to happen. I used to be a boxing hobbyist, and like, bring it on. You get banged around in the head. You know what is going to happen. All right, and then you do things to try to minimize it or to strike back. So, what was it like for you?
Man, I think what you just said. Being honest, it was the adrenaline kicks in, right? I'm an adrenaline junkie. I was in the military before. So before I came into police work, so I was used to getting up and going. But then, all the thoughts that run through your head, and thank God for training. I totally agree. The best officer out there is the one that's been trained the most and continues training. So I will say that initially, your adrenaline's pumped. You want to get the target, you want the subject, and you want to do everything you can to get that person or those people that are shooting at you. But then afterward, I have to admit that, when the adrenaline settles down and you have these thoughts that, it was pretty close.
So when that first push of the adrenaline and your heart's going, your blood pressure's up, you're all nervous, excited, how do you keep that under control So if you're chasing somebody, that you don't, put on the accelerator, and then when you catch a guy, beat him up. This is the scene that I see. You chase the guy, get him into the back seat. You put your hand gingerly on his head, make sure he doesn't hit his head. You put him. Meanwhile, if it was me, I'd be like completely crazy.
That's a great question, because the biggest thing I could say is, remember, cops are human too. I don't care how much you train somebody, they're human. And I know one thing I want to talk about is officer wellness.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of that, the stress isn't necessarily from the job, it's from family and stuff like that, because the usually not everybody should be a cop. That's why we have screening. That's why we have, ongoing, active supervision. So some people need to be removed. We've fired plenty of people over the years at Miami-Dade, as well as we've fired some here for a reason. But that drilling does kick in. It's the fight or flight. And so that does leave, it fills your body with cortisol and all these other chemicals. And if you don't have a healthy output, such as like working out or talking to people, or a good support system, it will cost that underlying stress will cause problems. And so a lot of cops have a lot of friends I stay in contact with. They've retired, and they did just the stress over the years. They didn't take care of it. And they're not doing really well, and they're very young. They're in their 50s, 55, and they had the 35 years in law enforcement, and they could have lots of productive years, but they don't do anything. It took a toll on them.
So what's it like when you're out there? You have the stress from wondering if this guy's going to run or shoot you. In the last 20 months, we've had, am I going to get COVID from this guy or this family or woman or whatever it happens to be? So that must add a lot to that stress.
No, it really did, especially the COVID, because it's like an invisible enemy. And I think the worst part was, at least with me, I have elderly in-laws in their 80s, and not knowing, we were all out on the street. We, from day one, the South Miami, the manager, the chief, the elected official were great. They got us all the PPE. They kept asking, what do you guys need? So this was something that there's no playbook for COVID. We have a playbook for riots. We have a playbook for hurricanes. You name it in police work, there's a playbook. It's been done. You keep making it better. But with the pandemic, we haven't had one. So it was the most unique thing in my career. And at the beginning, we didn't know how it was transmitted. Now we know, But back then, we kind of said, hey, let's not stop anybody. If you stop them, you have to stop them. You don't got to give them a ticket. Don't give them the pin to write. We just give them, there's something we have to do. Let's try to, like that. That was like in, I guess, February, March, or like March when it started, the end of March. So we had to adjust what we did. And then we quit doing a lot of traffic details. That's one of the biggest things in South Miami is people complain about the flow of traffic, especially the cut through traffic, and people don't live here cutting through and blocking neighborhoods or almost running over kids. So we do a lot of enforcement, but we had to curtail that a little and to account, but we still, number one, we had to respond. So if you call 911, we're going to go. And we were there. And I was very proud because we had nobody that refused to come to work. All our guys, and I say guys, that means, men and women, all of them, they came to work and they did a great job. And we were really proud of them. The chief, I know he was proud of them. And the city, they were there, supporting us. And even the city of South Miami, even during the pandemic, in the middle of the pandemic, we had the George Floyd incident. So again, it had nothing to do with us. And I was an individual, it has nothing to do with South Florida. Yet a lot of people were calling our guys saying, F the police. They drive by, yell at the cops for no reason. Some poor cop, some of our rookies got yelled at. They did nothing wrong. They're just on a regular traffic stop. But we were very thankful because we had 2 parades where people came around our station supporting the police.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the city, the residents here have been great. I mean, beyond great through the pandemic as well as through those protests. So it uplifted our guys because it kind of said, hey, most people, the vast majority of people support the police.
Well, let's talk about that. Let's talk about this, because we know that there's a small segment of police force, right? That, like the deputy chief said, they don't deserve to be in police force work. And the police departments, at least down in South Florida, I can't speak for other parts of the country, they pretty much police themselves, right? And on top of policing themselves, they also monitor on a regular basis. I know South Miami does. You monitor the officers' high stress incidents. So you talked about shootings. We talked about, COVID. Let's talk about your participation with Dade Chiefs and the wellness program to give the audience a little better understanding of what the internal mechanisms are of monitoring and ensuring that they're served correctly.
Right. Well, for the Dade Chiefs, what it is the Miami-Dade County Association of chiefs of police. It's all the chiefs can join this organization. Actually, just coincidentally, Chief Landa is the president right now. He got elected treasurer, and then you move up the ranks, the 4 ranks, then you become the chief. So he's in
The South Miami Police Chief, right?
He's South Miami Police Chief Renee Landa. He's the president of the Dade Chiefs. So he created a officer wellness. That's one thing that has been lacking. When I say wellness, specifically mental wellness. I can tell you, I had too many shootouts and fights and stuff. They track the number. Well, you can't go by a number. You have to go by each individual incident. For instance, if me and Mike are riding together as cops.
Oh, I can imagine that.
And
Can you imagine that?
and Mike's always getting complaints and I'm not, and we're both in the same thing. It's like, maybe something's wrong with Mike. So we're going to look at him. But if Mike's very aggressive officer, I say aggressive in a good way, the taxpayers pay us to work, not to eat donuts. So if Mike's always going to calls,
Donuts not bad though.
I like donuts. It's cop food. But if he's always going to do stuff, he's going to be more aggressive. Like I was always the biggest officer, the strongest officer on the team when I was a rookie, and everybody wanted to ride with me because I was like a bodyguard. But I never got it. I never bullied no one. Everybody would usually comply because I like to talk, not because I scared them. However, there's times like we had multiple Baker Acts. I got a weird quick stories. You can see that white spot there. I got bit by a Baker Act, a crazy person in 1989.
Baker Act is a person that's involuntarily committed for mental psychiatric care.
And then something really smart. Don't let cops do first aid, wait for rescue. But my cops put bleach on me because that's when AIDS first came out. They gave me a 3rd-degree chemical burn. Well, fast forward exactly 30 years to the date, to the month, the bite mark had cancer there. So I had to get surgery and they had to open it up, got 20 stitches. You can see
Jeez.
Don't know if it was causal or coincidental, but I'd have to go to the burn center back then because it wouldn't heal. It was a chemical burn. But it's just something, the day-to-day little injuries that you don't really hear about that happens to a lot of cops. But so the point I was getting to is the Miami-Dade has a great mental, employee assistance program. It used to be called psych service. Now it's health services. They're awesome. They're cutting edge, but they always weren't that way. And most departments don't. So we wanted to focus on that to improve ours and improve the whole county. So one thing that we've created with the chief is peer counseling, and through a group called Boulder Crest Foundation, which does military veterans, mostly from Iraq and Afghanistan, the last 10 years, guys that actually lost their limbs and stuff, they've helped them, but they actually now have gone into helping cops. So we're creating it here where we're going to train officers from every department, like peer support. So for instance, that goes a long way. It's one thing, you may not feel comfortable talking, to your family or to a psychologist, but other cops understand, the day-to-day stuff. And again, most of it's not the work. It's family or it's like outside influences that stress them out. So we want to get that up and running, which we're in the middle of getting it put in place.
So we've interviewed quite a few mental health organizations and therapists. And one of the things they continue to point out with the pandemic, and if it's in police work, everybody does not respond the same way. Some have a higher tolerance for it, some that can compensate for it. But I do want to do a shout out. Listen, if you're having some emotional problems, call 211, dial 911, walk into a police station, fire station, walk into the hospital. There's a National Alliance for Mental Illness. There's a lot of places that you can get help, and it really works.
No, there's no taboo. There's a lot more people have mental illness or issues that need help, and there's no shame in that. Come to our station, we'll get you the right resources, or go wherever you're comfortable with. But you need to, take care of that, whether you're a cop or a civilian or whoever you are.
So the most important thing is to say, police work, but police work is not about arresting people.
No,
it's about, caring for their certain needs. And did you just hear what the deputy chief said? Come to us. We will get you the right resources.
Yeah, we'd rather not arrest nobody. Even, at the height of arrest, I was in units where we made 8,000 to 12,000 arrests per year in Dade County. There's a lot of people that needed to be arrested, especially career criminals. But most people, anybody can have a DUI. Anybody can have, do something stupid, marijuana or something, which you're not going to get arrested for that now. But they did in the past. So arrest is just one little faction, one little piece of piece of what we do. Police is a tool within a thing, but we want to help people overall, not arrest them.
But the perception is you're going to get pulled over, whatever it is, and you might get arrested. All right. Yeah. And they might. So this part of this caring and directing them to whether it's a drug rehab or whether it's a psych hospital or to a regular hospital, all right, that people need to be more acutely aware of that. I do want to share, I was taking some pictures of a house right behind the office over there. So I was driving my truck back and forth over about a 50-foot area.
Well, suspicious there, buddy.
Yeah. So postman, a lady, she came up, "Are you okay?" And I go, "Yeah." She says, "Are you sure?" Because she saw me just go back and forth. And so, and I told her, yes, but it really says that people in government are now looking out for each other and trying to spot this stuff. So that I've never had somebody ask me that, but it's really a really good picture of what's really going on in the community. Can we address a little bit about the stress that is on the healthcare providers in Miami-Dade County, and specifically the ones that are working with COVID patients all the time, right? That's got to be a huge amount of stress.
That's a lot of stress, and it's very unfair. It's not here in Florida, but I know a lot of places, these poor, like especially the nurses, have risked their lives. Were there day one, as the doctors were, day one, and the healthcare workers, day one, working, not knowing how it's transmitted. So they showed up. That's very brave. That's beyond brave. There was no vaccine back then. There was, they had the PPE and stuff. They did stuff safely, but some of them still contracted, COVID, and they did it because, they busted their butt working. That was their thing. And now I know some places nationwide, they want to fire those same nurses for not getting vaccinated, which, you can get into the politics of that or stuff, but it's like, that's kind of, they're far safer now. And we know what it is, what it wasn't. So we work hand in hand with South Miami Hospital and Larkin. They're both great hospitals. We actually were lucky enough to show our appreciation. We gave them donuts to South Miami, and we had candy to Larkin. But those nurses are great. I got to actually I wrote a letter to the Herald about what I saw, and they actually printed it in the Herald, and I sent it to my nurse friends. But it says, there's an unwritten rule in police work that cops don't give nurses tickets. Now the rest of us can see why, because of their dedication and stuff. So they actually print that, but that's the reason. So is very stressful, because they can't relax. Like, at least with us, the cops, you go to the call, yes, it's stressful, but once that call's over, you can go, park in front of the Millers, unless they call the cops on you. You can park in front of the Millers building, have a Gatorade, write your report, and you're safe. They can't go anywhere. They have like lounges there, but they're in there, and so they're always exposed. In the hospital, we banned our people from going there unless they had to, because at the beginning of the pandemic, we didn't know, if it was airborne, if you walked in, and they actually had their protocols where, they didn't want people coming in unless it was the patient. So they're under constant stress, the healthcare workers.
I like to shift to something though. Let's talk about a little bit of war stories, police stories, and I know you have plenty. I mean, you rose to the ranks. What was your highest level of command in Miami-Dade Police?
I was when I retired in 2018, I was a division chief, which was like, I guess you're fourth in command, and out of 4,500 people. But I was over Homeland Security, warrants, narcotics, organized crime, economic crimes,
critical units,
and all these and the court system. Even Fisher Island was part of our thing, but we had a lot of stuff. Each that level of chief, you have a big division within Miami-Dade. There's a couple of chiefs. There's like I think 5 or 6 chiefs now. So I mean, you have a lot. But I was, before that, I was a major at all these places, a captain, lieutenant, a sergeant, a corporal, detective, and officer. So I never skipped any ranks. Went up the ranks. And Dade County is kind of a microcosm for any police issue in the country. You name it, we have it. Whether it's and actually, Chief Land is a good person. He's a little older than I am. He looks young, but he started in 1980 at the McDuffie riot. So Dade County, using Dade County is like a training thing. That's why we're kind of so ahead of other departments nationwide, like the South Florida policing, because we went through the Mario boat lift. We went through, the McDuffie riots.
Do you remember the Mario boat lift?
Absolutely. And all the tents downtown.
Yeah, remember?
I thought you were in elementary school back then. Then
I've been told those stories.
Then you went through the Cocaine Cowboys, which is a documentary they've had, and people, but that went through. I grew up in South Miami from 1970 to 2003, So South Miami has a lot of ties.
Let's talk
to
about
old
that. Let's
stories
talk about
from-
some of the stories in South Miami. Some of the stories you lived in.
I mean, even like South Miami as a kid, I remember vividly from the Cocaine Cowboys. I was like 14 or 15 when they did a double homicide. Griselda Blanco's crew off of 4-5 Street and I think 5-8 Avenue. And I remember going there because the Channel 10 was there because they had Ann Bishop was there, and
Yeah.
I think Fort Lauderdale.
The
But
late,
I remember they had a
Bishop, right?
chopper and they were there, but I remember the homicide there. And then the guy, the Dayland shooting in 1979 with the it's in that Cocaine Cowboys documentary. The guy who orchestrated it lived on 4-5 Street also. There's like little clusters of drug dealers. South Miami is a great community, but like anywhere, you had, you know, a few people. You also had really strange guys that played football with me. A disproportionate number from South Miami joined the Yahwehs. And I got to talk to them while I was a cop in Liberty City. I was like, what are you doing? And, you know,
And the Yahweh being the Ben Yahweh.
Yahweh ben Yahweh, it was a cult.
Were you around with Neon Leon's? It was over where Casa Cuba is.
No, I remember it, but it was
So it
before
was
my
big,
time as a
big
cop.
drug dealer, alleged drug dealer.
Yeah.
Had a house down, big house, and then one day, guy drives up on a Vespa, sees him, right there around the same time.
Yeah, that was in the cocaine. That was before I was a cop.
That definitely sounds like
the early.
South American hit.
Yeah, there was a.
I do want to share an experience I had a couple days ago. Woman from across the street goes, Michael, she comes running over. Some kids just dumped this car right here. Call the cops. Yeah. I said, okay, I go. I see this car. Was a white Charger sports car, and the kids are gone. All right. I call the police. I said, by the way, some kids just left this car here. I don't know anything about it, but okay. So the cops are coming over. I'm looking at my phone to see what they look like so I can show it to them. And by the time and of course I think it's stolen. By the time the police arrived, the kids were coming back from the gas station with a gas tank to put gas into it. So in my millisecond of that assumption, right, these unconscious biases we have, right, it was extraordinary wake-up call for me. So what is that like when you're in the midst of something that occurred and you have to make a decision? Is that a phone or is that a gun?
No, that's a huge issue with in policing. I'll give you an example of what we do. Besides all the training, we do ongoing training. So even the guys, including the chief who has 40 years, me with 34 years, 33, or like my senior captain that's 34 years, we go through at our training center, which you guys are welcome to come and you're actually welcome to participate. It's called a FATS machine. And what it is, it's a giant video game almost where you have to, it's shoot, don't shoot scenarios. So it has split-second decisions. And so people in that video will turn around with their wallet and will turn around, or other people will turn around. So if you underreact, you're going to get shot in the video world. If you overreact, it's something, it's a training thing. So we do that a lot, where we, besides our normal annual training, we actually have to live fire and you have to qualify a minimum standard. And our guys, we have our own trainers. So we have more training per officer than Miami-Dade does. And I work there, and they're a great department, one of the best departments in the country. But because we have like a dedicated sergeant and lieutenant do the training, we're always pulling people in for extra training. We'll just pull them randomly off the road and say, hey, we're going to do today the fast machine. So they can, especially the new guys, because they don't have the action. Like guys like this young man or me, we've been through a lot. But
Compliment to me. I like that.
the new people, they're 22, they're 23, they're 24. They have no life experience. They're good people. The crime is really down. Contrary to what people see in the media, we're back to like the level of crime, like the 70s, early 80s, before 80s. If you did like a bar graph, it'd be like this, like a routine bell curve. The peak would be like 91. We're down, but because of 24/7 media coverage, people don't know this, and social media, cable, everybody thinks crime's out of control. In South Florida, it's not. But one crime is one too many if you're the victim. So, of course, we're going to always fight.
Robert and I want to know, did you ever get into a wrestling match with a perpetrator?
Why are you including me in your question?
Oh, I'm sorry.
I might have had some with Robert because we had so many. That was back then. Again, it was like the early 90s was the peak of crime nationwide and here. And almost every week we were getting to fights and to wrestling matches. And I was trained before that. Before I was a cop, I was a wrestler and took karate. So a lot of the new people, when I say new people, I mean like younger generation, they've never had a fight, and that's not a bad thing. We did have fights in school. I know the Millers always got into fights, but
Especially your brother.
oh yeah, no, for sure, your brother. But so you kind of came in police work. You were a little tougher, so we have to train them how to wrestle, and it looks really bad. For instance, if I had to arrest, just say we had a crazy little old lady who's 80 pounds, but we had to take her into custody because something was wrong with her. She's running in traffic. It's going to look really bad if she's resisting because I'm not going to hurt her. So you're kind of like, you're trying to put her hands behind her back without hurting her. I'm like 3 times her size, but it's one of those where it looks bad. And so you end up wrestling. A lot of times you'll come up and you'll see cops wrestling. Oh, leave the guy alone. What are you doing? You don't know what happened before. And sometimes we have no discretion. We don't arrest people for a marijuana, a joint. We don't arrest people for a lot of stuff that we used to arrest them for. But there's those days, and it's usually Baker Act. Somebody mentally ill that we have to take in custody for evaluation because where they were harm to themselves or others, we can't leave them on the street. So people come up, they don't know what happened or why we're doing it, and it looks bad. There's no easy way to get someone in custody if they're resisting. Because if she's just doing this, we're not going to punch her because I'm strong enough, or you guys are strong to pull her. But she's like this, it's going to look like you're manhandling.
It sure looks terrible.
It looks
painful.
Yeah.
All right. When I watch the stuff on whatever show it is, and they're getting this guy's arm behind, even that, I feel the stretch right here. So, and when the perpetrator is being tied like that, doesn't in and itself, don't they just say, I'm going to give up because there's 3 cops there and I know I'm going to get handcuffed?
I mean, that's you're looking at it as logical, Mike Miller. A lot of people either in a distressed state where they're not logical, there's something wrong with them and not their fault. And then other people are just, can I say on their assholes that they resist authority no matter what. We get people all the time. And so we have a homeless unit. There's a homeless problem in Dade County, which there's a lot of people working on it to fix it. But what we have, there's about 14 people in South Miami that are what we call chronic service resistant homeless people. We can't arrest them for being homeless. You'd violate their rights, nor should you. We've tried to get each one, all the resources to get them, transition them to Camilla's house, different places. South Miami's helped us, the hospital, the Camilla's house. We have an officer, Rodney Napier, who's our liaison for the homeless outreach program. He does a great job, but there's those, they don't fall through the crack because of whatever, illness they have. They're resistant to service. So we get in, sometimes they have episodes, schizophrenia or something, and we end up, out of necessity, we have to wrestle with them because we're trying not to hurt them. We had a tase one a while back. The taser had no effect. He was running in traffic. He was going to get hurt. And people said, why'd you tase him? We had no choice. We couldn't get him. And a taser doesn't have any residual damage to you besides the puncture. But somebody my size, like, it's going to be very hard for cops to handcuff me if I don't want them to handcuff. I'm 280 and a trained fighter. So the taser, you hit the taser, the more muscular you are, you freeze up. And that's why we have the taser. It doesn't hurt the heart. A lot of people think, oh, you're not electrocuting them. What? So it just it's like making sausage. Sometimes you see the actual arrest or taking a mentally ill person into custody and they're resisting. They're not thinking sane like you. So they're not saying, let me just give up and go. And they're fighting and we have no choice. You don't want to hurt them. There's no excuse to abuse that person.
So
but it looks bad
one thing that is great to point out is most of us live lawful lives, right? Law-abiding citizens. We don't associate with criminals, right? But there's a small section of our society that breaks from that normality, what we know is normal. And it's hard for the average person to see themselves or to process what it would be to be in those type of situations. One of the best trainings, dollar for dollar, that I've ever went to, and I went to a lot of training, 30 years of nothing but training, in addition to life experience on the road, was the CIT training with Hopsy Cobbett,
Oh.
a program that was created by Judge Leifman, Stephen Leifman, to be able to address those reoccurring, I guess, criminal justice clients that really don't fall into the criminal justice because
So
they're mental
CIT
health issues.
stands for what?
Crisis intervention.
Crisis
team.
intervention, and you know about that. But
Yeah,
one of the scenarios that helped me better understand what a person who breaks from reality, that's hearing voices, an exercise that I was taught was, picture yourself in a crowded restaurant with all kinds of noise around you, loud noise, ambient noise around you, people talking, and they're talking right behind you, and try to carry a rational conversation with a person right in front of you. Most likely, you're not going to hear the person that's directly across from you because you're going to be hearing everybody else. And these people who resist officers, who are breaking from reality, who at times are committing crimes because of their mental health condition, are in those episodes. And the officers have to discern whether it's an actual criminal offender or it's a person with mental health issues.
So
You want to talk about that?
Yeah, and along that line, when people are homeless and they're stopping on the street corners and everything, people really need to be clear that they're not doing anything illegal if they're just moving along.
Well, they're just moving along, and it's just, we have sympathy for them, and we've also we've had to arrest a few, like at Casa Cuba, where they've warned them, hey, you can't be here, stay here, harassing customers, and we've had, hey, please leave, and they haven't. And one guy, he punched Detective Bosch, and Bosch had to
Great
take
officer.
action. Great officer. He worked a long time in the city. Very nice guy. Doesn't want to, most cops, there's very few cops left. And I'll say this, I speaking in South Florida, that sign up to abuse people because there's so many safeguards. Besides, the department, we're overseen by FDLE, the state attorney's office, the feds. There's, the video cameras. Everybody, has a camera surveying. When I came on, no one had a cell phone, and there was not a lot of video camera. So if a cop back then did something, but now you have millions of interactions per day nationwide and very few bad incidents.
So if you were going to guess, what percentage of people that are chronically homeless have real mental issues? Not they're feeling happy or sad, but real mental issues. What would you guess?
I would say, because I've worked on and off of homeless communities since the 80s. I'd say the majority, I don't know the percentage. I don't want to, guess the percentage, but I know that Homeless Trust may have numbers. Almost all of them. It's not what people think. It's not somebody that lost their job or got evicted. Now they're homeless. Those people live with a friend or a family member. The ones that are chronic homeless, that we see that have, those are the ones that they're service resistant. No matter how, we get the best service in the world. We bring the people out from the Homeless Trust. We get, that personal attention with Officer Napier, and they just don't want the help. And it's because of their mental thing.
So, Robert, a couple of years ago, Christmas time, Grant went with somebody and with a lot of pairs of shoes and went underneath some bridges downtown when they were videoing a lot of it. Grant came back. He was completely changed. He was stunned, right? They weren't like stopping by. That was their place. That was their, if you will, their home. Yeah. He came back. He's still beside himself that goes on. All right. And actually it caused Grant to make us bigger, make it people more aware of that. And speaking of the Homeless Trust, say, hey, these people need help. Not that they didn't know that, but the real question is, if somebody doesn't want help, you cannot force them, right? Unless if they're hurting themselves or somebody else, fine. But if they're not, there's no law that says you have to have, a roof over your head.
Right. That's the issue, where it's a fine balance, but you have civil liberties and people, rightfully so. You need people to fight for homeless people's rights. I'll give you an example. Years ago, they'd have a guy pushing a buggy, not a stolen buggy from Winn-Dixie, but a buggy with cans. That's his property. Cops would throw it away or leave it there, and somebody would steal it. You can't do that now. We have to impound it. We have to safe keep it. And it's the right thing to do, because that's all their worldly possessions. But that's sometimes they, like you were saying, they end up on the street. So it's almost like, I helped when I was in Cutler Ridge years and years ago, when they started the homeless assistance thing down in Homestead. We had guys there. We had a constant problem. We would round them up. We would, hey, you want to go to Camilla's house? We drop them off there. That wasn't really solving the problem. So you need localized places where they can go to. But even then, they treat them great. They don't want to stay there, and you can't force them.
So, Robert,
No.
you know this better than I do. When people are with their carts, that's their home. That's their worldly possession. If you take that away, then they're just walking by themselves aimlessly with a cart. It looks like they've got something going there, and I think that helps keep them together.
You know, it's an interesting point, though. We're talking about right now, a sector community that's very small, but it is present member. I mean, it's a present issue in our community. We see more and more people walking the streets generally. At least I think I'd see more people now. But reality is that with COVID and the hard economic times that are before a lot of people, some of the people are now becoming homeless. And I'm not saying they're going to be on the street, but something to point out is that, well, we know a large percentage of the people that are homeless have mental health issues. A normal, everyday mainstream person can have a break from reality or can have a mental disorder. So it doesn't escape, and it's not like discriminatory. So anyone can have some mental health issues. And it's great to point out what you just said. And what you just said.
Well, you
There's
mentioned
no shame, there's no
Right, there's no-
embarrassment. Please seek help if you have.
I used to be a registered
issues.
nurse another lifetime ago. I was working in the psychiatric unit at Jackson Hospital in the
Oh, then you know.
in the late 60s. And so I was going to a therapist at the same time. And I said, the only difference, Doc, between me and them is I got the keys. He says, Michael, that's a big difference. And sometimes that is it. That's
a
little difference.
A great analogy. And like you mentioned, Hopsy Kava, she's super because she trained, it's funny.
Phenomenal.
I talked to her last night. She's actually doing a part of our officer wellness. She's going to be like the clinical director to screen the cops we're doing, but she's doing a training at South Miami Hospital next week with some cops who were, for their mental health.
We should do a recording over there.
She's great. She's somebody that you definitely should interview, but she's trained probably.
She's been on the show.
Oh, she has? Okay, then you know her. I mean, she's super, but she's, there's no way. I told her this last night and she thanked me. I said, you've definitely saved, there's no way to quantify the number of lives she's saved at Judge Liefman through their training. But a lot of times, when I came on, you didn't, we'd get guys, cocaine psychosis, it'd be like 10 cops wrestling a guy that was 100 pounds and he had superhuman strength because whatever the psychosis of the cocaine, it would open up the adrenaline, and that's like a shot of
They
like
feel no pain.
You feel no pain, and they get really strong. I've had guys, little skinny people, do a push-up with like 5 guys my size on top, trying to get them in custody. I've seen them walk through walls, like sheetrock walls, just boom. That doesn't happen a lot now because it's not the same cocaine problem. But you have mentally ill people who you got to have both the tools as well as the training. And like I think 2004, the state attorney asked me to speak to the grand jury about tasers, and the report was titled, "Tasers Save Lives," and they do, mostly with Baker Acts, with people like that we have to, that we can't. The family will call that they're tearing up the house or they're in a schizophrenic episode. It's not their fault, so you don't want to hurt them, but you can't leave them there because they're going to kill a family member.
See, one of the things I'm recognizing is I wonder how many of the general public recognize the civil side of policemen and the caring part, the social worker part, the nursing, the mothering, the doctoring, the healthcare part. I'm not sure, who
Well, it's boring because it doesn't, like on cops, they don't show because it's boring. The routine, the daily, all day long, because I have some guys that are really impressive. I have like an old guy the other day who's been around here 30 years. He gave his food to a homeless guy. The same day, one of our rookies gave her food to a homeless person and only knew from driving around and talking to other people. So they didn't go like, hey, look what I did. But most cops are, because the nature of the personality that they're carrying, not all, but most, especially now, because we screen people. Like, we're going to hire a couple officers now. We have vacancies and we need to hire them. We did 8 interviews. So we do an extensive background, as does most police departments. We're not going to hire somebody that has issues from another department. They've been fired or they've done, something wrong. That's a good predictor of future behavior. Something minor as a kid, you tried marijuana, that's stupid. That's irrelevant. But you do stuff as a kid. But I'm talking about somebody who's 30 years old, they stolen credit cards. We're not going to hire you. Period. There's no way. Yeah. And because, you're entrusted with the public's thing. So like Mike said, most people don't know because you don't hear about all the good. You'll hear about one bad thing, like the George Floyd thing, and then they take that bad and put it on the cops. That'd be the equivalent of me taking, the race of a perpetrator. Say I have a rapist that's Japanese, and I blame all the Japanese, which I think this country did in the 40s, but that's a different story. But you can't say one cop in, the middle of Georgia did something that applies here. It's not fair. It's not right. You got to judge individuals for individuals. So that's how you got to do it.
So what I'd like to do, Michael, is bring in more stories, but let's, in the future, right? Let's bring in officers who have worked these notorious cases in South Florida, both known, publicly known, and not so publicly known, to get their perception or their insight as to those cases, how they handle those cases, because a lot of officers, I would say the majority of the officers, not all, do more good on a day-to-day basis that goes unrecognized.
One of the things that we do is that we share content with people. And I'm looking at this whole thing that what policemen do, which is directed by police across the country and locally by Dade County, I assume, right? That a lot of people don't know of this training that's done and the compassion that is there. And I think that it's important for us to be able to go from the stories to where you call the police. All right, when you got a problem, you're going to call the police, and they shouldn't be afraid that something's going to happen to them. I do want to share this great story. I pulled up to a stoplight, and I see, of course, the people asking for money. So whatever you're thinking right now about what we go through when it's there, I wrote that. All right. I don't want to touch them. I'll give them the coins. How do I do that? I'll give them a bill. Should I give whatever bill I pull out of my pocket, a 1 or a 5 or a 20?
You got hundreds.
Okay.
We know that.
And so I go through this whole scenario as I'm writing it. And then I write, and now the stoplight is turned green, on to my next lesson. And I think that's for all of us to recognize, because this happened over here doesn't mean that's the story. And for us down here, where we're always dealing with people that are irate, and when you call them domestics, that must be terrible when you go to a call and the husband's crazy, the wife is crazy, they're screaming at each other. And what happens when you go to arrest one of them? What does the spouse do, right? They're happy, they're sad. And I think these things are great to be able to share with people so they can get an understanding that it's more than just what you see on cops.
Yeah, it's the media, especially cop shows, are very inaccurate almost on everything because it's overdone. Most cops go 30 years without having any shootings. Most cops go, their whole career without having to hit anybody a lot of times. Depends on where you work. Everywhere is different. Every neighborhood's different. I started off in Liberty City, which most people live there are good people. They can't go nowhere, they're poor, but there's a higher crime area. It doesn't mean that people are worse. It means there's just a concentrated number of criminals in a lower socioeconomic area. It has nothing to do with skin color. It has nothing to do with the quality of people there. But you do have a lot of those areas, so you're going to more calls, more violent calls. It's not the same neighborhood now, and I ended up. I have a unique perspective on that area because not only did I grow up there as a cop, and I saw how it was really bad, and it got a lot nicer. I was also on the Urban Leagues board, and they made me a life member. So I still do stuff with them, and you can see the change. So like I was talking about, Hopsy, how she saved lives. T. Willard Fair, who's a living legend. He's the president of the Urban League. He's a crime fighter because he has fought more a crime by doing what he does. Getting kids through school, getting them stuff. So again, I support that 100%. Mm-hmm. There's a girls group I work with from Liberty City that I'm actually Monday going to do something with them, but. Miss Lawrence, who's the CEO of it, she's a crime fighter. There's very few after-school things for young girls. The girls don't commit crimes at the rate of boys. We know that, but all the programs are for boys. So her program's for girls. So she'd say she's a crime fighter too. So you don't got to be a cop, wear a cape, a gun and badge to be a crime fighter by doing what's right to help kids. But for the grace of God, praise God, I was a bad little kid. I had the best parents in the world. But I did stupid stuff, risk-taking stuff, doing stuff, just stupid stuff that I shouldn't have done. And God, I guess, wanted me to be a cop because nothing violent, nothing bad. But I'm just saying you get, that's why I really hate arresting a juvenile unless it's something like, violent. But, any kid could do something stupid. And so we don't,
Arrest,
so you need people.
Last resort.
Right. You need people to get those kids that don't have the support system that we all had to get through those teenage years where you make bad decisions and hormones and all that.
So how are we doing on time? Just
I
curious.
had probably a couple minutes, but I do want to share now. Commissioner Keona McGee was here.
Yeah.
Good guy.
And he told me when he was a kid, he got into some problems and he got arrested. And then he wants money, used that to go to law school. He said, I became a prosecutor because of that. I go, a prosecutor? I said, why would you do that? Why wouldn't you be a defense attorney? He says, because the prosecutor with like this, one little thing, he can let that kid off, all right, and without having to put him through that whole system and make him hate stuff, right? So it's really, when I looked at that, and you're 100% right, sometimes you just got to give these young people a chance so they don't get into the system, because unfortunately, when they go in the system, there's a whole bunch of issues.
So Keone wrote his first book. I think his first book was I Am Myrtle, right? Look it up. Great book. Does he run for sheriff 2024? Yeah. Keone, I want an answer from you. Served in the legislature, you owe me that much.
He was a good prosecutor. I worked with him in state attorney. I worked with him when I was in Cutler Ridge. Good guy. But you said it's huge. We had, like, when I was in narcotics, I brought the drug court, which was a great thing. I brought them to the site where we arrested people. We do, stings, buyer takedown. Most people, a lot of the ones that were crackheads, for lack of a better word, multiple arrests, you can't, we couldn't fix them. God could, but we couldn't. But there's a lot of people, it was like first time or second time, they got deferred. They didn't get a pass. And if they completed the court mandated treatment, it wiped their slate clean. That was great because, kids do stupid stuff. So you want that kid or that person like Keone did, or like other people did. We tried to steer the ones there. But now if you got multiple robbery pass, you need to be locked away, period, because we're not going to change them. You can't get people like that, on Oprah show or Dr. Phil and Sigmund Freud counseling them to change. We're not going to change them, but that's a teeny fraction of people. Most people are good. I could tell you 3 years in cop work, working the worst places in Dade County, most people are good, including the worst areas. They're good people. So it's just a few that need to be,
One of the great things that's happened to the Miller family during the last 20 months is we realized that we could have a conversation about race relations without being called a racist. And a lot of people are very sensitive about having that conversation. I personally have gotten a lot better. It started with a group calling me, "You're the white guy." And it was like, I didn't know what to say. I'm going,
Mike, you never heard that, have you?
You are kind of white.
Yes. And you know what? And it is this awareness that we get to. Yes, we come from all over the world, all different shades, right? And all different genders and all different locations, right? And can't we all just get along, and we all live in a yellow submarine? So I've learned a lot about the human condition, and to recognize that we do walk in with unconscious bias. Like when the kids, I was sure they stole that sports car from some guy, right? And when the cop was putting the gas into the car for them, I was floored that I thought because they were young, all right, that they stole that car, all right? And I'm thinking, if it would have been a guy in a suit and he would have knocked on the door, by the way, I parked my car, I'm out of gas, I'll be back, I would have looked at it differently. So there's lots of people that we think are bad or they're doing wrong things. In fact, they're not. They just haven't gotten to that point to where we can relate to them. So I'm happy with the police force and the direction of this training that the police are getting. And so the public, I think, is the other side of that, which is how do we train the public so they're a little more forgiving and understanding, say, this is the picture, not just the part that we watch on TV on channel 7, all right, whatever time that's on.
You hit the nail on the head, and like I've been saying it forever. And I did classes for the Urban League on this. And what do you do when a cop stops you? I go, never ever resist. If you got something, they have even if you think it's a bad arrest, don't resist. Get a lawyer, do what you got to do. You can sue the police department, you can sue, but if you resist, you're escalating it. And the cops, yes, we train them to de-escalate stuff, but we don't, nor should we train them not to arrest somebody who needs to be arrested. If Mike, Miller has a warrant for, robbery, I got to arrest them. I can't let them go. I have no discretion. The officer in the street has zero discretion. We must do everything to get you in custody. God forbid it's a murder. So we have to, whether we get, shot, whether we get whatever. So we're going to, not let you go. So don't resist. You won't get hurt. That's something that so there is no training for the public, but I would do the training with young men. And I'd say, hey, what do you do when the cop stops you? Oh, I'm gonna say, F you, cop. I go, why would you do that? I go, cops are people too. Be nice. It's like you're trying to pick up a young lady. You're gonna be mean to her or nice to her. Oh, I'd be nice to her. Okay, be nice to the cop. Maybe they won't even give you a ticket. A lot of times we do traffic because that's our number one issue. Is the complaints we get is people speeding. They ran over someone's cat the other day. They cutting through. So we do a lot of traffic, but we don't have quotas. We've never had quotas, nor will we. And if somebody, the whole point, want to educate you. We stopped Mike Miller speeding, and he's like, "Hey man, I'm sorry I was speeding. I didn't pay. Hey, Mike, have a good day. We know you. You're a fixture in the community. You do good stuff. We don't have to give you a ticket." Now, if he's like, "Hey, I don't like cops. You guys eat donuts. You messed up salty donut. You took the Mojo donuts. You take all our donuts. You don't stick to Dunkin' Donuts. Blah blah blah." And he's being, not being nice. He might get a ticket because he's not learning the education part about, hey, just be careful. You didn't realize you're going, 45 and it's a school zone, or that's kind of fast, but it's 15 and you're going at 25, 30, we might not give you a ticket. It's just so it's one of these, we just want people to, hey, be aware that you did this infraction. Don't do it again. Be aware because you could run over a kid. Kids do stupid stuff. I did. I ran into the street. I got ran over as a kid, David Fairchild. I didn't get hurt, but I ran into a car that was moving. Because why? Because I was a dumb little kid, or a kid without, not thinking like we do now. Even though my parents were great parents and drilled it, hey, look both ways. You're messing around, you run it. So that's why it's so important to obey the law in school zones, because some kid may run in front and it's going to ruin your life by you running over a kid. It doesn't take much pressure to kill a little kid.
So as we get ready to close, 2 points. We have these shows to educate you, to show you the inside that from law enforcement, that the deputy chief here, who's been a police officer 30 some odd years, is a human being. He just pointed it out. But the other part of this is to show and highlight the great work that our officers do. We had Chief Lander here, who brought up 100 and plus rounds, fired casings, and he poured them on the desk, right? It was to highlight how quickly 100 some odd rounds can be fired. We had an incident in North Dade a couple months back. Subjects get out of a car, shot into a crowd of people, killed a few people, and injured more. Those subjects fled. Subsequently, the police departments got together. They launched a countywide initiative with the leaders, elected leaders, and it was summer heat. Can you talk about a little bit of the outcome? Because we've had 2 successful points that have recently developed.
I think Miami-Dade Police Department has one of the best homicide units in the country. Going back many years, they were so good that they were allowed to handle the FBI shooting back in the 80s, and they've never lost their experience
Status.
stuff, the status. So they're very good. A lot of people don't understand. We could only work the leads we have. We can't magically. I can't come in, for instance, on a scene like that. You got multiple cameras. You got people's cell phones, so they may even have evidence that they don't know they had. They may have been taping something. A car drives by, a tag. It just takes that one little tip. That's why I like Miami-Dade, the Crime Stoppers and the gun bounty. Those tips are so good because that one person may have overheard something. So they worked it, around the clock relentlessly. Then, while they never stopped working it when Surfside happened, they had to, their homicide had to also were in charge of the investigation at Surfside. It's not a murder, but there's dead people, like 100 plus dead people. So they're working that too. And that's another thing that, really in South Florida, there's not a playbook for it. So, but they never stopped doing it. So I know they've arrested, I think, 2 of the 3 shooters so far. I don't really have the details because it's a different department, but I can say I know all the people there, and the major there is one of the guys I train as the director there too. Their heart's in it 100%. They will not stop till they, close every homicide case. Cases never are put to the side. They have the ones that are older, they're called cold cases. And they still have detectives that anything comes up, they review them, they try to get them. But I don't know what broke those cases, if it was informants or if it was different type of evidence, but they've done above and beyond from day one on that call. And then Summer Heat was a countywide effort to do multiple things to both fight crime now and to prevent kids from going down that life of crime. So you want to do, a holistic approach. Kind of like I was mentioning the Urban League and Embrace Girls program, where they're doing stuff to fight crime by getting kids to not go down that path of crime. I was very lucky. I had the best parents. I could have easily, because I was such a hyper kid and like always doing stuff. If I didn't have the right parents or I was in the wrong environment,
Mhm.
I would have gone down that. I could have gone down that path of crime. So you need those programs. So you always want to do a holistic approach, and you have to remember too, what we have to follow the law. Bad guys don't. So we can't do things without a search warrant. People ask, why you gotta get a search warrant? Because this evidence we get from the house where the murder is, the subject may be living there. So we just come in there and take the gun. We can take the body out. We can take the injured party out, but we can't start processing the scene until we get a search warrant. So all the evidence that we get now upholds in court, so it doesn't get suppressed or thrown out. So a lot of people don't understand that we have to follow laws very, and rightfully so. The Fourth Amendment, I mean, everything should be followed, and we train the guys for that. So it's not hard. And any cop that bitches, I got to follow the Fourth Amendment, they shouldn't be a cop. Fourth Amendment is great. I'd rather, a lot of bad
Constitutional
guys,
rights.
right? Go. We swear, we take a sworn oath to uphold the Constitution. So that means, criminals' rights too. I'd rather, bad guys go free than any innocent person go to prison, because it definitely happens in America. I'm not saying it happened here. I'm sure it's happened in the past.
Yeah.
But we go above and beyond, and so does Miami-Dade Police Department. So that's something that they should be really proud of. They never give up on cases.
So when we watch these shows, all right, on TV where the cops, the SWAT team just constantly throughout the show, they're barging in, and going to all this stuff. It rarely happens like that. There's a process that's involved.
Oh yeah, tell them about the search warrant real quick.
Well,
As we're getting ready to wrap up, but tell them about the search warrants.
For years, I was in
criteria
charge
for obtaining
of
search warrant.
narcotics for 7 years as the major commander, and I was there as a lieutenant and sergeant officer. Well, we did, under my command, we did hundreds and hundreds of search warrants. But people don't understand, a search warrant is a big, big deal. If I'm going to do a search warrant on the Miller's house because they had unlawful donuts, I can't just go, hey, call the SWAT team, we're going to hit a warrant. We got to first have probable cause to obtain that warrant. Then we got to write it up, and it has to fit perfectly. Not only does it have to fit with your an affidavit sworn to that this is what happened, the perpetrator did this. You now got to go to state attorney. They got to sign off on it. Then once they sign off on it, you sign off on it, and then the command staff signs off on it. So there's all these checks and balances. The next thing you have to do is get a judge, the uncalled judge. He or she reviews it, and a lot of them, the judges are pretty good. We've had some in the past when I started weren't that good, but most of the judges now, very smart. They ask questions. They don't want you to do a search warrant. It's like a last resort. So to get to that point of a search warrant, it's a big deal. So, and that's the safeguards of the Constitution. Same thing. Everybody always calls me, hey, they'll say, don't talk on the phone. I go, dude, I used to be in charge of the phone tapping and the wires and stuff. To get a wire is almost impossible. Right. You got to go. It's the state attorney before you can even get one. It has to be a last resort on a case. Like if I want to do a wire on the Miller's organization, I'm not going to get one because I'm not going to have the probable cause. But you would have to go through so many hoops. It's a little different if they were terrorists and the Patriot Act, kind of streamlined stuff. That's a different issue. But with the local cops, it's almost impossible. So those are just last resort tools. And most crimes don't require a search warrant. But just a routine homicide, you have to get a warrant. Say somebody drove up to South Miami Police Department in a car with their friend shot in the back. We'll get rescued. We'll take them to the hospital. We'll freeze everything, but we can't start searching that car and processing it until we get a search warrant. Because if the person driving is the perpetrator, we've now violated his or her rights, and it's going to get thrown out in court, and it's going to mess up the prosecution. And it's wrong. So we do everything by the numbers. And there's a lot of things that you're not going to see from a cop show because it's not sexy. It's not, it slows down the show. It's the tedious. And like Mike was saying, I can say South Miami, I'm very proud of the men and women here because they go above and beyond to help people. And a lot of times, and then they'll call a lot of times the lieutenant. We have our lieutenants and especially the captain. They're always out there on the street going to calls to help them. And a lot of times they're picking up the phone to one of our community service officers. We have like two really good ones, getting clothes for people, or getting this, not just homeless people, but kids. Like there were some kids right down the street from here that Officer Melvis Lopez, who actually I know her from high school, I went to high school with her. She found a family she adopted. So she's spending all this money on her own, and she's not, rich like, you guys. So we all kicked in and gave her stuff, but she's always doing that. And as most cops are, they're always, Again, not everyone, but not everyone has that personality, but most, because they went into professionals, they want to help. And it's not like TV stuff where, you get to shoot every day and car chases and, catch the bad guy. We don't make that many arrests because we don't have the level of crime that we used to. Usually your crime rate would justify a rise in arrest. So we have traffic and we catch people with suspended license, but most of them are people that had bad luck during COVID. Our chief put out, hey, listen, if the guy, they lost their job for COVID, now they got their license, they got a ticket. We don't want to load them up on tickets, and now they can never get their license fixed. So, we show that compassion and say, especially the person has a good, attitude. Hey, listen, you can't, you gotta get your tag fixed. It's expired. Even the state of Florida, I think, gave a leeway for a while, or your license is expired. You couldn't get it renewed at the beginning of the pandemic. So we purposely, ordered. It was a directive, and when we say a directive, it comes like an email comes from me or the chief. They got to follow it. So we'll say, hey, listen, do not give these people a ticket if their license is expired. But then you have a separate one, a habitual traffic offender for DUI. That person needs to go to jail because they're going to do it again. They're going to kill a family member of yours. So there's a difference. Not everybody has a suspended license the same.
I do want to compliment the South Miami Police Department. We've been at this location, I think, for 45 years. I'm very happy with the police, and they're usually here if it's an urgent matter. I've timed it. It's been a couple of years. One time, 45 seconds. I'm going, hey, that's great. And we feel very protected here. So my hat's off to you.
We have
the
departments and zones, like 6, where we have every zone has officers. So that's to lower your response time. I'll give you an example. In my neighborhood, I live in West Pines. And I know they mean well, but they'll have the cops, pick up a lost dog. Well, the one cop in my neighborhood now is babysitting a dog. That's ridiculous. That should be animal services. So I always tell people that I live so far west by the Everglades, that cop is now on East Pines taking a dog. And the average civilian doesn't understand. So it's like, wait a minute, now I call 911. What's the response time? They're going to have to come from another zone. So it may be 5 minutes. So do you want a bad guy in your house with your kid and wife for 5 minutes or for 45 seconds, like Mike said? So, that's something to always factor in, response time. And we have one of the lowest response times, like less 2 minutes in all of Dade County. And that's very, the chief's had that set up. He's been the chief like 7 years. It's been like that for a long time. And we're going to maintain it. That's why we're hiring the 2 officers, because we always want to be, if you pick up the phone in South Miami and call 911 or a regular call, we can't put our lights and siren if you call because there's a raccoon, eating your dog or something in the back. But if somebody's breaking in, that's a 911 call. If there's a fight, somebody's fighting, that's a 911 call, stuff like that. Or there's a car crash, somebody's injured, that's a 911 call. We're going to come there with lights and siren to get there, safely, but get there quickly.
So leadership, very important. So we talked about training, we talked about leadership, we talked about compassion, we talked about officers having to do the hard stuff, hands-on, arrest. Parting words, because I know that we've been on for a while. We want you to provide us some questions and let us know what you think of the show. Michael, any parting words?
I do. Be safe out there. Be considerate to everybody, right? And be careful of what you're thinking about other people, because it just might not be what you think about
biases.
That's one of the best lessons that real cops learn is things aren't what they seem, because you don't know, you don't know. That's why you have to investigate. Like, there's nothing wrong with calling the cops. The cops are trained not to come there and assume. You have to investigate. Like with a tip, I'll give you an example. The gun bounty is one of the best things the county has, because I can call, if I know that Mike has an AK-47 illegal in his house, I can call and say, hey, there in this house, there's an AK, but the cops can't come kick your door in. We have to now, that's like a target acquisition. We have to now come and develop our own probable cause to get a warrant. Well, same thing. Every cop we deploy, they need to go there safely, but with an open mind. You can't come there and automatically take side. You got a guy in a business suit and then another guy who's homeless. Well, we don't know. Maybe that guy in the business suit is a scumbag and kicked the homeless guy because he's just mean. And so we go there and say, hey, what's going on? That's why we always ask people, hey, step back. We do it for officer safety, for their safety, because if they were fighting, we don't want them all of a sudden to punch. And we haven't been able to check them, and we don't check everybody. Like a lot of people will say, well, why the cop? He walked up to me, had his hand by his gun. I goes, because he doesn't know you. He's walking up to a car. It's very dangerous. There's like a lot of cops get killed every year, not just once in a while, every year a lot, and in Florida on traffic stops. But we can't let you know that we're thinking that. We have to always be looking. That's why they do certain things, tactics. It's nothing, no disrespect to you. It's for officer safety. But the officer, that somebody who can't balance that shouldn't be a cop, because, you know, we that's why we have standards. That's why we have, you know, hey, you got to be polite, you got to be professional, you can't overreact, and occasionally you may lose your temper and stuff, but there's a level. It's one thing if you're discourteous, we'll deal with that. You'll get counseled, maybe reprimanded, but I can't get mad at Robert on a stop and punch him, because now I just did a crime, so I can't be a cop. You know, so
So if you have one question, I mean, one thing you want the public to know, leave the public with a message. What is
I
that?
think cops are human too. People are the cops aren't robots, so they're human. But remember, they have a difficult job because they're looking at them like, you know, again, most cop encounters, you're going to calls that it's not criminal involved, but traffic stops are very dangerous because you don't know who you're stopping. We get a lot of warrants of violent people on traffic stops. So our traffic enforcement is twofold. One, it's to fight crime. First and foremost is to keep the flow, expeditious flow of traffic within South Miami, because you guys pay a lot of taxes and you want, you know, to be able to get out of your neighborhood and drive. But two, we do it because you get a lot of crime. And, you know, we have US 1 is a major thoroughfare. Criminals use US 1 a lot. Criminals go down 6, 7. I used to live on you know, by the YMCA. Or South Miami Park, and I lived on Ludlam and Bird. You know, these are like Bird Road, 6, 7, you know, Sunset, Miller. They're all major thoroughfares. So criminals use those roads to get through. Again, most people are not criminals. We can't tell who's a criminal by looking at them. It doesn't matter. Or even if they have an old car beat up, that doesn't mean they're a criminal. They just got an old car. But when we stop them for whatever infraction or whatever, you know, probable cause we're stopping for them, we don't know who we're stopping. So just be you know, never resist. Don't give the officer a hard time. Just there's nothing wrong with asking an officer, why'd you stop me? But and most of the time, most people will not give you a ticket. Now, if you're like, I didn't do nothing, and obviously you know you did, but you're gonna get a ticket, and you should.
So being courteous goes both ways.
It goes both ways.
On that note, you've been listening to Police Stories. We hope to bring you a lot more of these at the Miami's community newspapers headquarters. Michael, I can't thank you so much for
My
this
pleasure,
opportunity to have these shows. Deputy Chief, I think South Miami, the residents of South Miami, very fortunate to have you on their staff.
Thank you, sir.
And the leadership team that's over there that you're part of. I am so proud to continue to serve with you, brother. Let's walk this path together. Thank you. Please drop us a line.
Thank you, Deputy
Thank
Chief.
you. Thank you, sir.